Hey, okay, welcome back. We are now on part 2 of modeling a 1x2 Lego brick in Blender. Here is where we left off in the first video. I have got a perfectly to scale, perfectly measured brick with a beautifully rendered base and two beautiful studs on top, and it's all to scale, but the problem is right now it's not one mesh. It's not one object. It's three objects. And we want it to be one object. And why do we want it to be one object? Because it's one thing, right? This should be one continuous shape, in my opinion. And we're going to do that today. We're going to add the studs to the geometry of the brick so that we have one shape. And the easiest way to demonstrate maybe why we would do that, if I pull up this PDF of the measurements that we found in the first video of a 2x4 brick, you look at the cross section here. This is one piece, right? Like it's one thick piece of plastic that goes around the whole perimeter, up and over the studs. This is all hollow. Inside the studs is hollow. You can see that in this shot here, these little circles. This is up into the inside of the studs. So we want to make one thing. The good news is this is where the fun part of Blender is, as far as I'm concerned. So how am I going to do this? I mean, I could just select all of these objects and hit Command J on my keyboard. And now if you look in Scene Collection here, it's one thing, right? Problem is it's not one thing. It's not one continuous piece of geometry. If I zoom in here and I go into Edit mode, remember I did that with Tab, and if I select one of these vertices here and I pull this up and I look inside, how can I do this? Turn on shading. This is not connected to this. It's joined. It's kind of like grouping, right? This is not one continuous mesh. So what we want to do is unjoin, undo, 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 undo. Okay, so now we've got a cube and two cylinders again. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to select our base mesh, and I'm going to go over to the sidebar here, and I'm going to make sure that I click on the wrench, and I'm going to pull up this modifiers panel. So this is where I can add, it's like algorithmic stuff you can do to an object. Modifiers are. And I'm going to add a modifier called Boolean. And Boolean allows us to select a second object and then do some stuff with those two objects. You'll notice there's these three different modes: intersect, union, and difference. Well, first off, I'm applying this Boolean modifier to the base, but I need to select the second object. I said it takes two objects. So where it says object here, I'm going to select the second object by picking the eyedropper and moving over and picking my cylinder. So now let's flip this into wireframe mode. So right off the bat, you can see some new geometry going on here. Right now I'm in difference mode. What it's going to do, if I hover over difference, it's going to remind us how this works. It says combines meshes in a subtractive way. So it's going to take whatever is in the object that I selected and it's going to remove it from the main object that I'm applying the modifier to. So theoretically, if I right now was to apply this and hide my cylinder, which one is this? Hide my cylinder. You'll see I've actually knocked a hole in this top face, which is actually perfect. That's exactly part of what we want to do. If I go into edit mode right now, you'll see there are these, should be 16 faces that are, 16 edges that I've created to form this circle. So imagine what I could do is I could now turn my cylinder back on and I could join these, I could attach these together, right? I could connect all these vertices up. I'd also want to remove the bottom face of the cylinder. Well, you know what? There's a much faster way of doing it. If I undo all of this until my modifier is back, so I've unapplied my modifier. If I just select union, and let's switch back to shading mode for a second. Before I apply, have a look at what's going on here. Notice how weird all these artifacts that are happening in my display on this one stud. This stud still looks fine, but look at this one. The reason that's happening is right now there's actually double geometry. There is my cylinder, but if I hide my cylinder, there's also now a second copy of the geometry from my cylinder in this other object. And that's because the union modifier, see it says right here, combine meshes in an additive way. It's going to take all of the geometry of the two meshes and put them together into one continuous solid piece. So that's actually what we want to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And I don't even need my stud anymore. So I'm going to delete my original stud, X, and delete. So now before I do the second stud, because I'm going to do it exactly the same way, let's select this object, which you'll notice the outline now includes, right? If I orbit here, you can see I'm now also selecting that stud geometry because it's all part of the same thing. If I switch into edit mode and I do what I did earlier and I select one of these vertices and I move it with G, it's going to be hard to see, but it's actually all part of the same thing now. Like there's no hole. Notice if I lift this up, I'm actually lifting this face. And in fact, if I go underneath and I switch to face mode and I select this face here and I delete it, actually let me just hide it for a minute. How can I do that? H. So have a look. We're now looking up inside the stud. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to do. Now, there's another step once we're done these two studs because we want to have some solidity. Is that a word? I don't know. We'll get there in a second. So I'm going to unhide, which I'm going to do. Actually, I'm just going to Command Z because there is an unhide command and I forget what it is at the moment. So that's great. Let's do exactly the same thing for this other stud. Select our main object, add a modifier, add a Boolean modifier, select that second stud, switch it to union, apply, and then delete the cylinder. X, delete. And there we go. So already we're in much better shape. But if I have a look at the cross section right now, turn on wireframe mode. That's not wireframe mode. Turn on wireframe mode. You'll see I've got an outside and an inside wall to the base, but I don't have an outside and an inside wall to my stud. Remember this PDF? This stud should have it has an inner cavity, but it also has a thickness. So we need to figure out how to add that in. So let's do that next. How are we going to do that? I probably should have thought this out. But this is part of why we learn from somebody who doesn't know, right? We're learning together here. I've actually got a thought. If I don't worry for a second about creating that cavity, but instead I worry about another thing that we need to do, which is punching these holes in this face. This face right here. Right along that, what is the top of the hollow, that face that we hid earlier, I need holes where the studs go. So let us switch this back to shading and turn off, oh, there's our wireframe. Turn off wireframe. X-ray. I said wireframe earlier. I meant X-ray mode. This is wireframe. This is X-ray. X-ray lets you see through the thing. I'm going to create new cylinders. And the reason I'm going to create new cylinders is because I'm going to use cylinders to punch holes in this using the Boolean modifier. Remember a second ago we said that there was another mode to the Boolean modifier where I can subtract geometry? That's exactly what I'm going to do here. So let's do that. Let's create a cylinder that we're going to add centered here. Shift A to add a new mesh, and we're going to add a cylinder. All right, and our cylinder is ginormous. Of course it is. So let's pull up our PDF again. What is the diameter of that inner hole? That inner hole is 2.6 meters in diameter. So that is going to be the X and the Y dimensions of this cylinder. And actually, just so that it isn't ridiculously tall, let's apply that to the height as well. So remember, I can click and drag because I'm going to change all of these dimensions to 2.6 millimeters. And we're going to zoom way in. And let's just get this so that we can see it. There we go. So this is what we're going to use to make the hole in the bottom. So the first thing we need to do is line this up so that it's centered on the stud. How can we do that? So what I'm going to do for that is I'm actually going to use the 3D cursor. We haven't talked about the 3D cursor yet. It is super duper useful though once you figure out how it works. So right now the 3D cursor is positioned where it starts in a new Blender file. That's what I keep pointing to it, but I haven't said it. This thing, this funny little widget here, that is the 3D cursor. It starts at 0, 0, 0 in a new Blender file. So that is the very center of the whole world. Called the world origin, I believe. We want to move that right now, and we're going to move it so that it's centered on this face of this stud. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select this object, I'm going to switch to edit mode with tab, and I'm going to switch to face select with 3, and I'm going to select this face. While this face is selected, I can hit Shift S, I think, on my keyboard. And one of these options will let me move the cursor to the thing that is selected. Right here, cursor to selected. This will take my cursor, snap 3D cursor to the world origin. No, that's this. Snap 3D cursor to the middle of the selected item. Well, right now, this item that I have selected is just a face. So it's basically a two-dimensional object. So the center or the middle of that face is the center, X and Y center, and right in line with the Z coordinate. That's what I want to pick. So watch this. Cursor to selected. Notice now my cursor is exactly in the middle there. So that is handy because now I can get out of edit mode. I can select this new cylinder, and I can, while I have it selected, I can hit Shift S again. Whoop, let's do it so that I can see it a little bit better. So we can move the cursor, but we can also move the selection to the cursor. And that's what I want to do. Selection to cursor right here. And that's that. So that has now taken the center of my new cylinder and moved it so that its center is on the 3D cursor. So if I actually look at this from above, you can see, and switch to wireframe, those circles, that's perfect. That is absolutely dead perfect center. And this is the part of Blender that I love, is when you're operating in absolutes. You know, empirical measurements and, you know, high specificity. I don't have to eyeball it. I don't have to hope that it's close. It's not just close. It is perfect. Micron perfect. So what we now want to do is we want to duplicate that and move it to the center of this other one. So I'm going to select this object and I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate. And I'm actually not going to click. If I press Escape right now, my duplicate will remain, but it will remain in the exact position of the original. So I press Escape. Notice over here I have two cylinders. I have the original one that we just duplicated, and there's the duplicate. And the reason I did that, I could also do the cursor thing again over here. That would still work perfectly well, but I now have a shortcut because I remember that these studs, the centers of these studs, are 8 millimeters apart. So I should be able to, while I've got this duplicate selected, press G to move it, G to move it. Oh, Blender doesn't have the focus. Try again. G to move it, and X to lock to the X-axis, right? Remember how that works. And I'm going to move it 8 millimeters to the right. Actually, if I notice up at the very top, as I move, you see how it's showing me how far I've moved. Negative. I want to go in the negative direction, so I'm going to say negative 0.008. That's 8 millimeters. Enter. So now we have two of those. That is a weird looking Lego brick. We have two of those exactly where we want them, except we want to move them down so that they intersect with this top face, because I'm going to use them to cut a hole in that face. So select them both. G to move, Z to move in the Z direction, and I just need to make sure that they're not touching anything else. Actually, if we position this correctly, this can also be, oh, look at that happy accident. We can actually make this part of the inner part of our studs. Remember how we said we need the inner face of the studs? That will be perfect. Oh, this stuff is just working out nicely. I was originally just going to use those cylinders to punch these holes, but look at this. Of course, those cylinders also will be the interface of those studs. So we have to figure out the thickness of the stud top, and it looks like that's just 1 millimeter as well. The top face of the brick thickness is 1 millimeter. It looks as though it just continues, and it's 1 millimeter on top as well. So we... Yes. Okay. We need to move these now. Click back in here. We need to move them so that they are flush to the top of the studs. And I'll explain why in a second. G, Z to move. B to lock to one of the vertexes. We need to zoom in here. See what I'm doing a little bit clearer. G, Z. Okay, and B to pick a vertex. Which ones are the front ones? I'm doing this from a weird angle. I think that's this, and snap to here. Is that right? That looks right. If I switch to front orthographic, yes. Okay, so notice they're now lined up perfectly. I want this to be 1 millimeter down, 1 millimeter negative in the Z direction. So that's easy. G, Z, negative 0.001. Okay. So that now gives us the right thickness of the stud top. So all we need to do now is what we were going to do before, which is remove... I'm going to duplicate these, and I may not need the duplicates. Shift D, escape. I'm going to make copies of these and just hide them, because I feel like I might need those later. So let's go ahead and let's remove the circles from this top face here. Let's go back into this and X-ray mode. Let us select this object. Actually, let's do this from the bottom so I can see everything properly. We're going to take this object and we're going to apply a modifier, and we're going to apply a Boolean modifier, and we're going to do a difference this time. So we're going to difference the cylinder. And I'm going to say apply. And we're going to hide that cylinder. What has that done? Has that done what we want it to do? It looks like it has. And it actually looks like I don't need those duplicates. If I go into edit mode, yeah, I think that's right. This has probably become very hard to follow. Hopefully you still see what's going on. So we have this interface, which is the inside of the hollow of the main brick, and then it flows to this new cylinder that we just Boolean removed, and it comes up and across and down, and we're going to do the same thing over here. And then we've still got our outer face. So we've got the outside of the brick. Let me start doing some face selects. That'll help. So we have the outside of our... Where are you? Center. There we are. No. Here? There. Okay. We have the outside face of the brick. We have the top of the brick. We have the sides of the studs. We have the tops of the studs. So it's all connected. This is exactly what we wanted to accomplish. Okay. Let's go back into object mode, and let's get out of wireframe and X-ray. And let's out of X-ray. And let's now do this as well. So select our main brick, add modifier. What am I doing? Generate, Boolean. Difference. This cylinder. Apply. Didn't work because I did something wrong. Pick the cylinder again. Pick the cylinder. That's the cylinder. This difference. This cylinder. You know what? It's probably applying, and I can't see the application because my cylinder's in the way. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So it is working. Apply. Delete all these extra copies of cylinders. X. All right, they're gone. Now, we did it. I don't think that was very easy to follow. I'm going to get better at this, folks. But hopefully you see what we've accomplished, and hopefully it matches what I said we were going to do. How's our time? Do I want to keep going here? Because I still want to texture this. What are we at? We're at about, somewhere it says, 21 minutes. You know what? I think once we get to the 20-minute mark, that's probably a good spot. So there's going to be a part 3. Part 3, we're going to apply... Actually, you know what? Very quickly, before we do that, why don't we do some beveling? Before we wrap this up, let's do a little bit of beveling, because right now these edges are all very, very sharp. And we don't want them to be very, very sharp. We want nice, soft Lego. If you have... Here, where's our reference photo? If you have a Lego brick right here. So there's a photo. There's a photograph of a piece of Lego. I mean, the shape is right. But look at how sharp these edges are for us on our model. And how soft they are, right? They're all nice and rounded. All these edges are all nice and rounded. So we're going to use another modifier to do that, because trying to do that by hand, I don't even know if you could. There's probably a way, but a wonderful, wonderful shortcut we've got is this one here called bevel. So when I add it by default, you can tell it's got the right idea. The bevels are too big for starters, and I think we probably want to increase the number of segments. So notice the segments here. I can make this go up. This is how many steps are there on the bevel, and the more I add, the smoother it gets. So I think for now we're maybe going to only add 2, because it's also way bigger than I want it to be. Right now the amount is 0.1 meters. Let's try 1/10 of that, 0.01 meters. And why does that look the same? That looks the same to me. Oh, okay, that's 0. 0.06. Try 0.001. Is it just too small? Maybe it's too small an object to bevel the amount that we want. Well, isn't that terrible? Offset, width, depth, percent, absolute. I don't know what any of that does. Sometimes you can get in here and just muck with things a little bit. In this case, the mucking is not helping at all. Limit method. Angle. Maybe there's a limit. Can I change this? That's having no... Oh! Oh! Okay, so limit angle. Interesting. So let's... Now that that's... Actually, that's probably about perfect, isn't it? And I'm not going to apply this modifier. Does it looks good on the inside? I think that's probably pretty close. Through watching other tutorials and watching how the bevel modifier gets applied, what happens is the moment we apply it, we introduce all kinds of new geometry. And that makes the object more complicated. So if I actually switch into edit mode, you'll notice my core geometry is still exactly the same, right? And it doesn't line up with the way the object looks. The moment I go and apply it, I'll do it. Well, I can't do it. I can't apply it. All right, well, I don't know why we can't apply it. That's fun. Was it because I'm in edit mode? It's because I was in edit mode. In object mode. As soon as I apply this, and then I go back into edit mode, notice my geometry now, right? It's reflective of the new shape, because that's what we've done. We've changed the shape of the object, and we've made the object way more complicated. We don't really want the object to be this complicated. We just want it to look this complicated, from what I understand. So I'm actually going to undo the application of that modifier, and we're just going to leave that there. So there we go. Now we have switch it to this mode for a second. There we go. And turn off all the other stuff. Look at what we made. And press N to get that out of there. Look at that. Look at that. We did that together. You and I. So the problem is there's no texture on it right now. This is just the generic default Blender texture that gets applied to objects when you don't have a texture. So in video 3, which should be the last video, we're going to learn how to make this look like plastic. Maybe I'll put it on some kind of a table or some kind of a surface. Maybe we'll add a little bit of lighting. We'll make it look all fancy. And there you go. So we now have a fully modeled. I could now export this as an object that I can take into a gaming platform if I wanted to make a Lego game. It's now this perfect little mesh that I think is optimized, but meets all of our criteria for it being one continuous object. So anyhow, thanks for sticking around. It's another long video, and we'll see you in part 3. Happy Blender.